So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to show you how to make the main sprite for our maze game. I'm going to give you the basic foundations to how to create a working sprite. Feel free, once you've got yours working to the same as what I've shown you in the video, to then experiment and see if you can improve the sprite and improve the way and the mechanics of how it works. Now, before we do start, make sure that you have signed in. Now, you should have already previously set up your Scratch account, so I'm just going to sign into my one now. Okay, so I'm signed in, and then what I can now do is I can name it. So I am going to call this Maze Game. Okay, and that's just so when we save it, we can know what it's called. So make sure you've logged in, make sure you've given your maze a name. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the cat sprite. Bye bye, Mr. Cat. Okay, and just click on that little bin with the cross. Okay, and then once I've done that, I'm now going to add a new sprite in. So I go down to the cat's head here with the little plus. I'm going to go to the paintbrush. Okay, now it should take you straight there, but to do this first part, we need to be on the costume tab. So if you end up on code or sounds, okay, make sure you're on the costumes tab. And if for any reason you can't see the costumes tab, it will be because you're on backdrops. Okay, you'll notice when you're on the editing in backdrops, it's called backdrops. But we want to be on the sprite and we want to be on the costume tab. Now, this is where a lot of people go wrong. Notice the little square in the cross, this little circle and crosshairs here. The middle of our sprite, the middle of our square needs to go right on be in the middle of where that crosshairs is. If you don't do that, your sprite will be wonky when you try to move it. So I'm just going to set the outline, okay? And I'm going to set it to this one, which means it's invisible, okay? Because I don't want to have an outline, I just want it to be a solid coloured square. And then I'm going to set the colour, and I want mine to be red, the best football team in the world, okay? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the square. I'm going to just draw it off the circle to start off with, just so I can. And I'm going to get it perfectly square, I'm holding the shift key down. So if you press shift as you draw it, you can then, it's a perfect square. So if I don't have shift down, it goes not in perspective. So hold shift down, get a square. It wants to be about that big. And then once you've done it, I'm just going to grab it. And if it's a little bit small like this is here, a little tip, just if you just zoom in on the magnifying glass, it'll make it easier to move it. So I'm just going to now drag it. It needs to go where the crosshairs are, and you'll notice it'll snap when it's straight in the middle, and it wants to be exactly in the middle. If it's not, like I say, when you do your code, it will be wonky. So it should look something like this. Okay, so that's all we're going to draw for our basic sprite. Now, just some things to notice before we go on to do this next bit. The way the maze will operate is if your sprite, the colour here, so if this red colour touches the side of the maze, it'll take you back to the start. So you can have a fancier sprite, but just remember you will need to have a colour around the outline that then can be used to set whenever that sprite touches the side of your maze to take it back to the start again. Okay, so I'm going to now go to my code window. Okay, now before I do anything, I'm going to move my sprite to where I want it to start from. And make sure before you move it, make sure you're not moving it in costume mode, because remember it needs to be in that middle square. Make sure you're in code window, and when you move it, you're going to use this window up here. So I'm just going to drag it, and I'm going to start my maze from over here. Now, all of my mazes will always start on this side and finish here. Now, what a lot of students will do is they'll start their character up here and then do the maze, so the maze actually starts up here. Now, where that causes issues is because obviously it'll be touching the wrong colour, and it'll be constantly resetting and causing a bug in your maze. So make sure wherever you start this sprite, it's going to be from where the character's always going to start. And just remember that when you come to draw your maze backdrops in a bit. Okay, don't worry about it for now, but when you start doing the backdrops for the next video, that will be important. So the first thing we're going to do is in our code window, we need to set what we call an event. Okay, now events are really important because an event occurs when something happens in the program, and we want this event to start as soon as the green flag is clicked. So we go to this one. When the green flag is clicked, we're going to drop it here. Now the next one we need to go to is motion. And remember, these are color coded, so motion is blue. Okay, now what we want our sprite to do when we click that green flag, we want the sprite to go to the start position. Now the reason I moved the sprite to where I want to start from, and you'll notice here, if I just go see on this block here, notice this number when I move it. Okay, so it's currently on minus 226 minus 114. If I move it, notice how it changes. So what I'm going to do is I want to move it to where it starts from. It'll set this to the correct coordinates. I can then move that into my jigsaw piece. And they clip together like jigsaw pieces when you drop them. So the next one we need is we need to go down to the one that says pointing direction 90. Now, if I just drop that in and snap it and I just click on the number, you'll notice we can set which direction we want our sprite to move when we press the green flag. So we want it to move in this direction. Okay, now what I'm going to drop in now is a loop, and we get our loops from the control box. So go to control. Okay, we're going to get a forever loop. Okay, and drop it in. We're then going to go to motion again, and we're going to get the motion and look for the one that says move 10 steps and just drop it into our forever loop. Now I'm going to test the code now just to show you all it'll work. So when I press green flag, our block starts moving straight away. And you'll notice every time I click the green flag, it starts from that position. The problem is it's moving too fast. The game will make it too hard. So I'm going to adjust this variable, this number here. I'm going to adjust it to 2. And you'll notice now our maze moves at a much more manageable speed. Okay, and you can, like I say, once we finish this, you can adjust it to make it work for your game. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drop in an if statement. So we're going to put some selection into our code. So we go to control. Okay, the block we're going to use is the if then block. I'm going to just clip it in, and notice I'm not dropping it underneath, I'm actually dropping it under the code there. Now what we want to say is when the up arrow key is pressed, we want our sprite to go up. So I'm going to need to go to the sensing block, which is the light blue block here, and I'm going to want to pull out this one, the one that says key space. Now don't worry, we're not going to set it so when we press the space bar, but when we drop it in, we then click on the drop down here, and we can set the drop down to the up arrow. Okay, now the next thing we need to do is we need to then change our sprite so it's pointing in a different direction. So I'm going to go back to motion again. I'm going to get the point in direction block. Okay, so I'm just going to drop, not there, so I'm using my mouse wrong. I'm going to drop it in there, but I'm going to click where it says 90, and I'm going to just move the arrow to the up position. Okay, and if we just test our code now, it starts off, if I press the up key, it moves up in the up direction. So we know that we're working correctly. Now, I'm going to show you a little cheat now, okay, how to do the other bits really quickly. So I'm going to click on the if statement block where it says then, and I'm just going to pull it out my block. I'm just going to put it here. I'm then going to right click on my block. I'm going to go to duplicate, and I'm going to drop it underneath. Now, what a lot of students do is they drop it under here like that and drop it into another block. If you do that, the code won't work. So make sure every time you drop it, you're dropping it exactly underneath. So notice there's two, they're on top of each other. So on this next one now, I'm going to set it to down. I'm then going to drop the arrow down. Okay. I'm then going to duplicate them again. So right click, duplicate. And remember, don't snap it inside. A lot of students do it, it causes problems, it'll break your code. You need to make sure you snap it directly underneath. Okay, and I'm just going to edit this code. So this one is going to be left. Okay, I'm going to set that to left. Okay, and then this one is going to be right. And I'm going to set this one to right. Now what I need to do is I need to drop this back underneath the move block. So just drop it in so it's underneath the move block. It should snap in perfectly like that. Okay, and now if I test my code, so I press the green flag, we should now be able to move using the arrow keys our block around. Okay, and if you notice, every time I click the green flag, it always starts from that same position. It restarts from that position. Before I stop, one other thing I want to do is I want to name my sprite. So at the moment it's called Sprite 1. I'm going to call it Maze Sprite, just so it's got a name. What you need to do now is make sure your code, your sprite works in the same way as mine. Okay, make sure you've named it. Okay, and make sure you've logged in. That's the first video completed.